I'm going to show how to make this multi-shape pattern using Affinity Photo's Procedural Texture Filter. I got the idea for this pattern when I was working with the exclusive OR function, and I had the idea that if I could overlap two polygons, I could get a different pattern to sort of come out of that from the overlap of those two shapes. When I first started looking at using a polygon to create something like this multi-shape pattern, the problem I ran into was when you break up a coordinate system into individual cells, a polygon in those cells can't overlap with another polygon. So I came up with the idea of creating two complete sets of polygons, including the coordinate systems. Eventually I came up with what I call the polystar pattern, and those worked even better for overlapping. And now I'm going to show how I made this multi-shape pattern. If you haven't seen the videos on the polygon or the polystar patterns yet, you might want to watch those if you want additional background into the theory on how those work. This multi-shape pattern is very flexible, and I think you can get a lot of really interesting patterns out of this thing. This pattern is a little more complex, so if you haven't done any of these before, you might want to try some of the earlier ones to get started. To get started, I'll start with a new document. I'm going to make it 1024 by 1024 pixels. Make sure it's in RGB 8 mode. Create that. I'm going to fill this with black, and then I'm going to add a live procedural texture filter. I'll add a single equation and assign it to all three channels. I'm going to have duplicates of all of my variables. I'll start with the scaling factor A. I'll add two real values for scaling. Scale 1 and scale 2. And I'll assign this one to variable A1, and this one will be A2. I'll just set these both up to 4 to get started. Next, I need the sides on the polygons, N1 and N2. Sides 1 and sides 2. And I guess I'll set this one to 3 and this one to 4. I'll have two angle inputs, PH1 and PH2 for angle 1 and angle 2. I'll have two real value exponents, B1 and B2. I'll call this power. I'll set these both to 1. Power 1 and power 2. I have a couple more I'll add later. To get started, I'm going to use a variable S1, which is equal to 360 degrees divided by the number of sides on the polygon. And so this will be sort of the angle that's swept by each side of the polygon. I'm going to copy that and paste it right here and change the 1s to 2. And then I'm going to have a variable v1 equals the vec2 of rx comma ry, so relative x and y, times a1 divided by the width of the document in pixels. So that looks like that. And then I'm going to take the fraction of this. So it'll break it up into little squares. Like that. Now I have to slide this over because I used Rx and Ry, so I'll just bring this over until the squares are aligned pretty much in my picture. Now I want the center of this centered in each square. I can do that just by subtracting 0.5, and it'll subtract 0.5 from each component of the vector. So moves the center over here. And now I'm going to create a copy of this. So I'll just copy this whole thing and paste it next to it and change all the 1s to 2s. And I'm going to take off the semicolon for now. And there's the other grid. And they're both the same right now. And so to move this over, I have to subtract off a 0.5 inside the parentheses. And that'll position one of the grids right at the intersection of the other grid, like that. Now, just to show that, I'm going to temporarily add a slider that will fade between the two grids. So I'll call this one fader. It's a 0 to 1 fader, and I'm just going to put in a temporary V1 times I plus V2 times 1 minus I. So now I can fade between the two grids and see what they look like. So there's the, here's the 1, and there's the 2. 1, 2. I'm just going to delete that. I don't need that. Next, I need to get the angle, and so I'll use the arctangent function to do that. So I'll start with a variable. I'm going to call it th1 for theta 1, and I'll use a tangent 2, the tangent 2 function of v1 dot y comma v1 dot x. And I'm going to add my phi value to this, phi1. Now I need another copy of this, so I'm going to copy all of this and paste it right here. And I'll change all the 1s to 2s. To make my polygon, I'm going to start with the cosine of theta 1. That'll make it into a straight line. But I have to subtract off S1, the number of sides, or the angle swept by a side, I guess is the best way to think about that, times the floor function of theta 1 divided by S1. So the total, or the current angle divided by the area, the angle swept by the side, and then add 1/2 to this. And I think I just have one more parentheses, so let's see if that works. Okay. So there is that, and now to make it into a triangle I have to multiply by the radius, which is the length of V1. Use the length vector, and now I have my triangle shapes. And so if I go up to N1, I can change to square, pentagon, all the different shapes. Okay, so that part works. So I'm going to make this into a variable now. I'll call it variable t1 equals all that, and I have a semicolon. I'll copy and paste this and change all the 1s to 2s. Alright, and then the last bit is to do an exclusive OR function, which is t1 times 1 minus t2 plus t2 times 1 minus t1. The easiest thing is to wrap these in an oscillator. So I'm going to use osci and just put this whole thing in parentheses, and I'll do that to both of them. And I'm going to add another set of variables here, C1 and C2, and I'm going to call this levels 1 and levels 2. And so this will be sort of a multiplying factor. I'll just set this up to 4. It's just sort of a scaling factor for this stuff so that it starts showing up on the oscillator. I'll just do C1 times that one and C2 times that one. So this is sort of the basis of the multi-shape pattern. And with this I can create a variety of different shapes and patterns. I can change the scaling, I can change the number of sides. Now these, I can change the angle to match these up in different ways, and these will control the number of stripes basically that you have, like that. And this looks maybe a little better when you have even numbers, but you can do it either way. Now, to make it more interesting and give me more variety, I'm going to put a power function around here, just around the cosine part. And so I'll start with POW, and then I have to go after the two parentheses, and put a comma B and another parentheses. And I'll do this, I have to put in a B1, and then over here around the cosine, W, and I'll put in a comma B2 parentheses. See if that works. Okay, so now it should look the same as before, but when I raise the power, it starts curving the edges. And then if I go a negative, it'll make it into sort of a flower shape, which is, really can't see. And also, sort of, if you have the lines turned on, it'll give you a lot more lines. But there you can sort of see the flower shape coming through. So if I set these like that, you get that. Now, let's just put these back at 1 for now. And then I can add a gradient map. All right, I'm going to use that one. I'll bring that in. And now one of the things I wanted to do was, I thought, well, this is interesting, but after a while I didn't like having just two values, and so I thought, well, one way I could change that is to divide one of these by 2. And so I'm going to divide this one by 2, my T2 variable by 2, and that picks up another value. So I thought that was cool. And then I can also divide this in the exclusive OR. If I divide this one by 2, it gives me another value. So now I have a bunch of different colors, and so I can go and modulate these. Now you could put a multiplier on these scaling values to stretch them out and stuff like that. I could replace, instead of this oscil I tried replacing that with a smooth step function, and that was pretty cool too. So that's what I'm calling the multi-shape pattern. I think there's a lot of different things you could do with this, so I'm hoping some of you will post some of your things you've come up with in the comments for this video. Otherwise, let me know if you have any comments or questions, and thanks for watching.